Our topic today is on back to school, how campaigns are looking this year versus last year, and how influencer marketing is pivoting during this uncertain and sensitive time. My name is Madison Smith, and I'm the Senior Marketing Strategist here at AspireIQ. And today I'm joined by two amazing co-hosts, my Director of Marketing Strategy, Magda, and our Account Director for our Managed Services, Jenna Malone. As we have all seen, this year for back to school is very uncertain. All across the US, parents and students are still waiting to hear if they'll be going back to school in person or virtually. And in turn, brands are unsure how to market their products while staying socially conscious of the current time. So we have surveyed 120 consumers and 160 influencers to get their insights on how they're navigating back to school. So we're gonna go ahead and share some of that data today. But first I wanna start off, Magda, I'd love for you to talk generally about what you're seeing in the industry and from the survey, the data you found most interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. So from the survey that we did, a couple points really stuck out to me. So the first one actually seems like a no-brainer, but it's that 76% of consumers are going to go back to school shopping this year. This is something that, we wouldn't even really consider last year, but times are so different right now. People don't know, do I need new supplies? Am I going to be in a classroom? Do I even need, new clothes, whatever that may be? But it's interesting and promising to see how many people still are going back to school shopping in some capacity, whether it's for the classroom or for their, new homeschool situation. The other point that I think is very, very interesting is that from June 1st to July 22nd, there was a 93% decrease in the number of back to school campaigns when compared to the same period of time last year. So that is a huge shift. So even though people are still shopping, consumers are still interested in back to school, brands almost don't know how to navigate a campaign around that. They don't know if it could come across as insensitive. They don't know what story they're trying to tell. So a lot of them, quite honestly, just aren't moving forward with campaigns the way that they would this time last year. But that said, brand search for back to school has risen by 300% from last year. So people are obviously still very interested in it. They want to know what's going on. They want to understand if back to school is even something that's happening, but they're a little hesitant to pull the trigger and actually create a campaign. To kind of put a strategy spin on this, I actually do think that back to school campaigns are incredibly relevant right now because students are going back to school in whatever capacity it is. It just might not necessarily be the way in which we're used to. But I think that there are definite needs for supplies, for a home office space to do your schoolwork at, and things like that, that I think brands can lean into that storytelling and speak a little bit more about what the new normal is versus focusing on trying to create a traditional back to school campaign in a time where it's, things aren't necessarily super normal. I think that another point to that is brands should be sensitive and focus on storytelling, keeping things a little bit more lighthearted versus just trying to sell products, and even gauge interest from their community, their consumers. Be like, hey, what are you guys thinking? What supplies do you need? And craft campaigns around that. So it's more based on the products, services, etc., that your consumers are looking for this back to school season versus just pushing the regular, products that you normally would in back to school season, whatever, your brand is offering.
That's great. And Jenna, you work really on the front lines with influencers, negotiating with them, coming up with these campaigns for the brand. So can you talk through a little bit about what you're seeing as to how back to school is going to look through the influencer lens?
Absolutely. So influencers are still talking about back to school right now, primarily on Instagram. We are seeing an uptick on TikTok with everything going on. We are seeing more mom creators over there. And with all of that, with everything going on right now, influencer is a little bit different in terms of back to school, just because there are all of these changes, right? Like maybe you aren't going back to school, but you have kids, you work, and a lot of people are kind of talking about how to maintain not only a work-life balance while working from home with kids, but also like that balance when you're homeschooling, trying to work a job, and, you know, trying to have that time for yourself as well. So we're seeing a lot of stuff talking about that, whether it's, you know, little tips for ways to make your day a little bit easier, get through things a little bit faster, and kind of do work up front, whether that's like meal prep, lesson prep, anything like that. We're also seeing, in terms of like the pricing in that area as well, we're seeing a lot of influencers raising their pricing. This could be due to several factors. A lot of brands are shifting towards a heavier focus on e-com and tapping into influencers more. Also, a lot of influencers, you know, they maybe prior to everything might have had like a full-time job, and now they're focusing solely on, you know, their content. And so in that situation, they're raising their prices as well. And we're also seeing a stronger push toward diversity in campaigns, which is really exciting to see. And as we're kind of looking at that, it really opens us up to a lot of different areas in the general influencer landscape. But of course, with everything going on, there are a lot of platform boycotts, a potential TikTok ban, everything like that. So it's super important to be agile as you're approaching these campaigns in your strategy, as well as the way you approach influencers, treating them with empathy and understanding that things are a little crazy right now for everyone. So just kind of having that kindness and that human element and that ability to be able to shift and pivot your strategies to support
Yeah,
people.
I think the idea of diversifying the platforms in which you're operating on is so critical. I think that a lot of times people are either, you know, they're very heavily focused on one specific platform, whether it's TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, etc. But you're exactly right. You know, if you're at the mercy of just one platform, it can be problematic if, you know, for whatever reason, access is cut off or whatever it may be. I think it's really important to have a diversified strategy. So you're telling that same back to school message that with, you know, grace, empathy, everything that you just mentioned, Jenna, and kind of formulating that content to work on a variety of platforms, and also thinking about your own marketing stack and how are you leveraging influencer content, leveraging your community's message, and then sharing that more broadly across your website, email marketing, SMS, whatever it may be. Having that consistent tone across the board, I think, is critical.
I love what you just said, Magda, about the community of it all, because we've seen, you know, a ton of brands right now that are utilizing, you know, activating a lot of their community on TikTok. And there have been, you know, the talks about the TikTok ban. So can you talk a little bit more about the community side of things? It's been a big word this year, and how it will sort of look with back to school through that community lens.
So one of the key stats from the report is that 79% of people are influenced by other people rather than ads when they're making back to school purchase decisions. So if you think about it, parents are trusting other parents, students are trusting other students. So that's really where community is critical. So community can mean a lot of things. It could be your community of influencers, it could be your community of loyal fans, it could be your community of experts, you know, including parents as being experts. But by activating those groups and by, you know, encouraging them to engage with your brand story, you really are able to improve your credibility. You're able to reach your customers where they are. To give you an example, if you think about parents that are part of any sort of PTA, you know, school functionalities, they're talking all the time about products, services that they use. Right now, things are looking quite a bit different. These meetings aren't happening in person, but people are still definitely communicating with one another. And if you can be a part of that conversation or put your brand message into that conversation, I think that that's really where the community element comes into play. I think that the last thing that is incredibly important, I'm sure that you guys have seen since, you know, everything kind of started going crazy with COVID in March, there are tons of emails that everyone's getting, I'm getting, saying to our community, we want to engage with our community, we want to hear from our community. I actually think that now more than ever is the time to have those conversations. I think a lot of people were reactionary, and then they were saying, you know, we want to put our message out there quickly, but perhaps didn't follow up the way that they could. I think right now is a really great time for brands to actually look at their community and do a pulse check. How are you feeling? You know, what's going on? What has changed? How can we as a brand support you, whether it's through fostering, you know, or creating this community space, or whether it's through tailoring products, you know, putting together custom bundles, all of the above. I think that now more than ever is a great time to revisit that community conversation.
Something, Magda, that you mentioned before is, and I want to really highlight these statistics that we were able to find from this survey, is that 93% decrease in campaigns during the time from June to July of last year. Campaigns have decreased 93%. And I think that goes to show how much even more uncertainty there is with brands just like not really knowing what to do, how to be marketing their products right now in such a sensitive time and being socially responsible. So Jenna, since you are on the front lines, you're talking to brands, you're seeing what campaigns are being done, especially versus what campaigns were done last year. Can you talk through like a little bit about what campaigns you were seeing last year and kind of how brands are pivoting this year?
So I think the biggest shift we're seeing this year in terms of the difference between this year and previous years is the shift in storytelling, and kind of telling that story of, you know, back to school, maybe you're at home, maybe you're not at home, and you're having to think about like security precautions and that sort of stuff to stay safe and stay well. There's a lot of stuff around like buying online, picking up on curbside. So making sure that those shifts in storytelling are unique and individual to each creator you're working with. Again, making sure that, you know, as Magda was saying, making sure that you are checking in on them and sort of understanding where they as an individual are. We actually have a couple clients that, you know, do annual back to school campaigns, and we have been working with them this year. And I think the biggest difference there is that storytelling and driving to e-com as opposed to, you know, in store. I will say, you know, to your point around that 93% decrease, the upside of that is that if you are able to sort of jump in at this, there's less competition, of course, and it kind of, the area isn't quite as noisy as it was, you know, last year in 2019. And influencers as a whole really are looking for these opportunities. I think they've been kind of checking it out and they're not seeing as many of those opportunities, whereas like last year they were already being reached out to and contracted by this point. So we're expecting to see a spike in that sort of around August, September. But as we kind of move through these, it's, you know, again, to Magda's point, using that empathy and treating people as individuals and not as that transactional relationship.
Yeah, I completely agree. All across the US, everyone is in a different situation. So like you said, some people are at home and some people aren't. Some people, you know, have to go back to work. Some states are saying, you know, these kids have to go back to school. So because of all the precautions that are being taken all across the US, Magda, can you talk through what more of like that back to school content is going to look like? Brands have stores and the stores are open and they may want influencers to actually go to the stores, but then maybe influencers don't really feel comfortable with that. Like, what do you think the content's really going to look like, and maybe how you recommend brands, you know, allow their influencers a little bit of leeway?
Yeah, this is, again, a really, really good question, and one that is incredibly tricky to navigate. I mean, I think that we keep our ear to the ground. We talk to so many clients every day, and things are just shifting so fast. I think one thing to think about is that's where leveraging influencers across, quite honestly, the whole US makes sense, because you can have different people tell stories that are relevant to the area that they're in. So if you have influencers where, you know, their full-time job is being a creator, but in their area, it's time for their kids to actually go back to school, they can talk about your brand and, you know, storytelling around the support that your brand's giving them as an individual as they're having this, you know, tricky decision to send their kids back to school, what safety precautions they're taking, perhaps how your brand may offer resources and tips around staying safe while you're in the classroom. There's lots of opportunity there. And then I think in the same vein, you can also have someone who is transitioning to completely, you know, a homeschool situation, have them tell their story. So that's really where the power of influence and the power of community comes into play, because you have the ability to tell your brand story through all these different perspectives. And now more than ever, Madison, you're exactly right. Like, even, you're in New Jersey, I'm in California, our situations are wildly different. I think that brands absolutely need to be incredibly mindful of what influencers, what their community members are comfortable with or not. If your campaign is a push to drive in-store traffic, I think be very upfront with the influencer, ask them their comfort level going in store or not going in store. And to Jenna's point, I think that grace and empathy is something that is now more than ever so critical. So understanding, if they say I'm actually not going to go in store, I wouldn't say end that partnership. I would say, how can we work with you and how can we still hear your story without perhaps driving to a store, because we understand that perhaps you don't want to go. And when it comes to the actual content that's being created, last year it was all about back to school outfits, dorm decor, which is very far off from what people are thinking about right now, driving sales, prepping their children for their first day back at school, lunchboxes, backpacks, etc. This year, the common themes that we're seeing are around school supplies for in-home classrooms, tips for parenting who are tips for parents who are homeschooling, and also safety tips for those who are going back to a classroom. So it's less about the products and services themselves and more about, again, providing value. And I think giving influencers the framework to work with and say, hey, this is our story. We want our back to school campaign to be all about how to have a productive work from home space for your children, to help us tell that story. And they can talk about, I've partnered with X brand, I have my new classroom set up, and here are actually 5 resources that they've provided around creating a productive environment for your kids to focus and learn. It really is more about the storytelling versus the selling. Selling will obviously happen as a result of this, but it is about leaning into those stories that you can tell a little bit more. And I think you could even get really creative. One thing that I was talking to, my younger sister is in college herself, and we were talking about just the dorm situation in general. And she was saying that, there's a lot of students that are just turning their home bedrooms into kind of a mini dorm. So like bringing things like a little mini fridge in there, just to create that college experience a little bit more and kind of shake up the routine. It's the same bedroom throughout summer, but let's give it a little bit of a makeover for back to school times. For brands that are in the interior design, decor space, that could be a really interesting thing to lean into, is helping these college students hack their childhood bedrooms and turn it into something that's a little bit more of a college vibe.
And I think to kind of piggyback on that in general, I think one of our clients actually sort of put together this surprise and delight package of supplies, as well as like this guide to sort of STEM activities for kids. And we sent it out to these influencers that they had partnered with in the past, with no specific expectations around like posting or anything like that. But the response that we received and that the brand received from these influencers in, sort of taking the initiative to do that, they were so incredibly like grateful and delighted. And it was just incredible feedback. And I think really help to cement the brand between those, the relationship between the brand and the influencers. And again, make them feel like, heard and valued, and, like the brand kind of understands what's going on and wants to support. So, thinking about ways to kind of do that as well is super beneficial.
Thank you so much for that insight. Yeah, it seems like from what you guys are all saying and what you're seeing is that it's really important now more than ever to be flexible, to be empathetic, and just allow influencers and your communities to be just very honest about their situations. And that's really how you're going to get your brand out there. I mean, there's really nothing better than word of mouth. And it seems like now more than ever, that's going to be really important. And the way that you represent your brand and the people that are working with your brand represent themselves is going to be super important. So what have been some of your favorite campaigns from brands that you guys have seen in the industry right now?
One that I love is Hollister, and they are working with some massive TikTok creators, the D'Amelio sisters, Charlie and Dixie, and they're creating this whole campaign focused around their denim, and they're calling it genealogists, but like jeans, G-E-A or J-E-A-N. And it's really clever. It's really cute. It's experimental video content. And it's basically designed to showcase the quality of Hollister denim. I think that the benefit of running a back to school campaign on a platform like TikTok is just how relatable it is. I know that that word is so overused, but the content is incredibly relatable. It's stuff that's enjoyable to watch. And also it has the ability to catch on as a trend so quickly. A lot of brands are turning their back to school campaign into a dance challenge or something like that. And that catches on and people start creating their own content based on that challenge. And that's just incredible. There are so many success stories around TikTok, but I really like the Hollister one because I think it's very fun and lighthearted. Another one that is really good is Danimal. So this isn't purely on TikTok, but Danimal's yogurt, they basically created campaign that is multi-channel, and it's all focused on kids being adventurous even if they're stuck at home. Nutrition and all of those things still being very, very critical. Even if you're not eating lunch with your friends at school, you still want to have that semblance of normalcy and things like that. So I really liked Danimals really focusing on like adventure at home and still having that fun, exciting element of being at school, but not being there.
I've been watching so for those who aren't familiar, American Eagle's sub-brand Aerie. They've been doing a campaign, they're calling it, like, the hashtag is Aerie Real Positivity. And they're a brand I've really loved in the space for a while because I feel like their marketing is very, very centered around authenticity at every level. And, again, somewhat of an overused word in the industry, but I feel like they really live it in a way that feels amazing. And so with this challenge, it's kind of like an ongoing thing. Again, not exclusively to TikTok, but it is asking users to kind of post these videos, sharing 3 things that they're thankful for and uploading the video with that hashtag, which is really exciting to see because it's very positive. It's nice to kind of see people like finding the silver lining and everything like that and kind of practicing that gratitude. So that's a really lovely one that has been ongoing and such a great brand.
This has been so insightful. Thank you guys so much for joining us today. And if you have any further questions on back to school, what types of influencers you should use, campaign ideas, or just generally want to talk about how your brand can get yourself out there in a sensitive and very mindful way, please feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to hop on the phone with you and talk through it.